Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. I was thinking today while I was trying to decide what to do for my video. I've never really done a video talking about putting a stone on a bail for a pendant, and so I thought it might be nice to show how to add a simple little faceted stone on a bail. I don't think it's too hard to do, and I'm going to use kind of my standard bail. If you want to see how to make that, here's a link to that. But we're going to modify it and add a bezel set little tiny faceted citrine to it. So I already made the pendant, and so this is probably going to be kind of a short video because it's not going to take too long to do, but I will go over again how to do that type of bail itself, and then we'll just add that on there. So before we do that, though, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. I have a new one, Anne Marie C. Thank you for signing up. I think you'll find that it's a nice group of people with a lot of knowledge over there that you can tap into. I know I do, and I do appreciate not only their financial support, but the nice community that they've made over there. So thank you all for that. My YouTube subscribers I also want to thank. We just passed 24,500, I think, and that's amazing. I can't believe that, and I truly appreciate the kind comments and the constructive criticism and things like that. I really value when someone tells me that I've helped them in some way, because it's nice to know that I'm not just kind of doing this without any kind of effect. I like to help people, so it's nice to know when people are getting some benefit out of this, so thank you for that. Thank you also for the kind contributions, the buy me a coffees, the super thanks, the buying my merch or my ebooks. That stuff really makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do it without your support, so thank you for that. All right, well, let's get started on this bail with a faceted stone on it. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks that you can get on my merch store. I think they're super useful. This one has a gauged inches to millimeters chart on the back. Some of the other ones have different information about metalsmithing. I like them because they have this dot matrix in the background that allows me to draw things a little bit more neatly. And it's a great way to keep a record of what you've made and what you're planning on making. So I can always go back and find out what I've done in the past. That's nice. So get yourself one or two of these. I think they're really useful. All right, so this is what I had in mind today. Really what we're talking about is this part here. This part here, I was trying to decide which way to go, and I picked out a pretty lapis here that I got at the last show. I've got a whole cart of these things, so I'm probably going to use these pretty frequently, but I like them. I decided to go with the point down on this teardrop shape, and I'm going to put on the bail a little accent citrine, because I think yellow and blue are kind of complementary, and so hopefully that'll go well on there. But we'll add it to the bail. But first we have to make the bail. I've already made the pendant, like I said. I made it a little bit different than I drew it. I curved this a little more. But I think that'll be pretty. Like that. So now we need to make the bail. And if you're interested in what I used to make this, even though I'm not showing you how to do it, 16 gauge round wire, which is 1.3 millimeters, I think. This was 12 gauge square that was flattened. 12 gauge, if I remember right, is 2 millimeters. It's got 26 gauge sheet for the bottom, and it's got 26 gauge 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip up top here, which I will file down a little bit probably. The balls that connect the little things on the side are made out of just scrap silver and melted into balls. So the bezel is 4.76 millimeters tall and 0.41 millimeters thick. So I think let's make a little bezel for this guy, and then we'll make a bail to mount it on. So for that I'm going to use 26 gauge sheet for the inside part. I'm going to use a little bit of 22 gauge wire to create a border on this kind of a bail. And that is 0.66 millimeters. 26 gauge, like I said, is, I don't know why I put I did 28 gauge for this one. I wanted it to be pretty small and petite here, and I don't need really thick bezel for this little tiny stone, so it's 0.33 millimeters or so. Here's the piece I'm going to use for that. Let me put this other stuff back for now. And I think I'm going to cut this a little bit shorter just because I don't need it to be quite that tall. So let's kind of scribe a line down it and just cut it shorter. This thing is going to be curved a little bit on the front, so we're going to need to have a little bit of room to file it so it's straightforward when we set it and everything. So I'm not going to cut it too short. I need probably about that much. Let's see where we're at on that if we just square that. It just shortens it a little bit. It'll save us some filing. So I just scribed a line down there with the tips of those. And we'll just cut that off a little shorter. So I think on this one we don't really have to put a step in the bezel because it's going to be mounted on this piece of sheet. If we need to, we can put a little ring inside of that. It doesn't even have to be soldered in, really, just to keep it at the right height. But I'm not sure we'll need that. We'll have to see when we... Depends on how tall you want your bezel to be. If I want it to be pretty short, I may not even need that. You don't want it sticking too far out, probably. I didn't even measure this stone. I should have measured that. I think it's a 3mm probably. About a 3mm. Let's try to get that snugged up around there as best we can. And a T-pin. Mark it just a tiny bit beyond where they meet. That'll give me a little filing space. Sometimes, if you're making kind of a simple pendant, just adding a little bit of bling to the top can really jazz it up. So you see I burnt my new spot already. I think I did that last night. So if you're new to my channel, I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything. It looks like this. I use a dropper bottle with a liquid flux and I drop it on. And my torch is a Silversmith model. It's their acetylene air torch. It pulls in atmospheric air through here to mix with gas. It produces a flame in the 4,000 degree range Fahrenheit. And so it's a little bit cooler than an oxyacetylene, but it's much hotter than a propane or a butane torch generally. So it's a great kind of happy medium, in my opinion. Let's get this ready to solder closed. Here's the #1 tip for most things, unless I'm, going to cast some silver or something. In which case, I'll use a bigger tip, like a #3. Okay, let's cut a little bit of solder for this. Oops, don't be that way. Now let's go ahead and shape this into a circle. We got the size pretty good. Okay, so now we got to keep in mind that the bail needs to be big enough to accommodate that thing. So when I cut a piece of this 26 gauge sheet, I want it to be wide enough for that, and it might be wide enough if I use this chunk right here. So we may just cut this a little bit further along, although it does have a little cut going in there. Although most of that's going to be cut away because I'm going to taper it. So let's go however long that is, maybe back over to about right there, and we'll just cut it off right here. Makes sense? I'm just going to cut this excess off here. Okay, so you've got a little piece of 26 gauge sheet. You can use thicker if you want, it just makes it a little bit harder to bend when you're doing this kind of stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two pieces of wire that go like this so that I can mount them on the sheet. And we'll just solder them down like that, and then we'll curve it around, and we should have a platform to put that bezel on. So let's see if we can do that. I have some piece of 22 gauge I cut. So I'm going to spend a little time straightening some of this out. Sometimes I use 20 gauge for this. Just depends on how bold I want my border to be. So I want this to be just a little bit longer than that. So let's cut two pieces like that. I'm just going to make a slight bend right here, right where the mark is. Center that off to the side of the wires. I'm just going to do that. That should work, I think. Will this fit in there? Sure, that should fit. Alright, I'm going to set him off to the side so I don't lose him. I already lost one piece of silver when I was prepping today. It went flying off the table and I couldn't find it, so I had to make that piece over. Okay, let's see. In order to have a nice clean attachment of these wires to this piece of sheet, I don't want to lean pieces of solder against the wires because it'll leave a big puddle. So I'm going to sweat a little tiny pieces of solder along the length of these. That way I can just put it in place, heat it till it flows again, and then it should stick it right down. At least in an ideal world. So I'm going to cut some very small little pieces. So I'm also going to do something called pick soldering, where I pick up a little bit of melted solder on the end of this soldering pick, heat this piece up to the soldering temperature, and just touch it there, and hopefully it should just jump on there if I do it right. It's one of those useful skills that kind of takes you to a brand new level, so if you're interested, I'll put a link up there for you to check it out. I have a pretty good video. Alright, let's give this a shot. First off, let's give these guys a little fluxed and crusty. I'll put one more in the middle there. Gotta be a little careful, these fine wires are pretty easy to melt. Pretty sure the first time I tried to do something like this, I melted the wires. Alright. Now the real trick with this part of it is those wires are kind of exposed up top here, and the sheet's much bigger. And we need to get that sheet up to the 1450 degrees that it takes to melt hard silver sheet or hard silver solder. So we need to keep it moving pretty fast around here while it's pumping heat into that bottom and not sticking long enough in one spot to melt that wire. You could also do it on one of those platforms where you can get underneath it. That works as well. Let's make sure we got a good seam all the way down. It looks like we do. So now I can just trim off the excess on the outside of these wires. And then I'm going to file this edge so it looks like it's just one single piece. It merges. So usually you wrap it around something that has a cylindrical shape. You could use a dapping punch or whatever. I'm just going to use my bail making pliers. I'm trying to get it to be in the right spot. I'm making kind of a teardrop shape when you look at it from the side. This is going to end up going over and being soldered onto this, like that. So it acts as the bail. But we need to mount that bezel on here and drill a hole in it next. So let's do that. We'll get this mostly shaped the way we want it to be. Find our little bezel. So something to think about here is we've got kind of a curve going on like right here. We want this to match up on that and face kind of forward, not being tipped upwards too much or tipped downwards too much. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to shape the bottom of the bezel just a little bit in order to get it to sit on there nicely. So it's going to need to kind of have a little dip inwards on either side. Let's see if I can make it work straight across from either side. Okay, so let's go use the Dremel to shape that a little bit. So I put a knife edge white silicone abrasive wheel on here. You could also use a ball burr if you wanted to. I just find these an easy way to kind of cut a little bit of a dip in here. I can see it's close, but when I move it, it can rock a little bit on this. So I think we need to go just a little bit deeper. Now I think we're talking. So I've mounted this on a third hand just to kind of keep it in place. We're going to flux it, put a few pieces of solder inside of that, and hopefully we have it on there straight. And it doesn't move when I do these. At least not much. Sometimes when the flux boils, things will move around a little bit, so if you kind of heat it gradually, it won't move around quite as much. Okay. Now this third hand is going to eat up a lot of heat, so it may take a little bit longer than you expect for such a small piece, because this big metal part bleeds a lot of heat off. So. I believe I saw a seam all the way around. I'll double check before we go any further. It's hard to tell with the flux on there still, but sometimes I think we're alright. So last step before we mount this is I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole. And so I want the tip of the stone to fit back in that little hole slightly, but I don't want it to sit too deep. So let's take a look. I'm thinking about a millimeter wide maybe. So I'm going to shoot for about a millimeter. Alright, so I got a little hole drilled in there. Filed the bezel down a little bit, so it's pretty close to the right height. You can kind of see how that's going to sit in there. But before we set that, of course, we need to hook this to the rest of the piece and get it all pickled and polished up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next. Let's put that away. If I need to, I can always drill the hole slightly bigger, or if I need to elevate the piece a little bit, I can put a little piece of like 20 gauge or 24 gauge wire in there as a little jump ring to raise it up. So there's lots of options if you like overdo the I used to overdo how big a hole sometimes, and it would sit down too low or whatever. But those kinds of things are usually fixable. Put it on here. After we get it through this, we need to get these two ends touching. And in order to do that, I'm going to kind of grab it in the middle here, bend it slightly inwards. Grab it in the middle of the back side here, bend it slightly inwards. Whenever you have two things like this and you're trying to push them together, they're always going to spring back a little bit. So instead of doing that fruitlessly, I took it and I bent it like this and then like this, so it forced those two ends together. You can always straighten it out once you have them soldered like that. So, but that's what we're going to do next. So, interestingly, this is one of the few times you don't have to worry about using a different kind of solder, because we're just going to heat the bale, not the rest of this thing, and so I don't really have to worry about accidentally melting something else, in theory. So, you can use a medium or easy solder if you want to. Nobody will judge you. At least I won't judge you. Okay. So let's let that pickle for a while, and then we'll get those things set. Alright, so I got the lapis set, and this is all ready to be set. So one of the hard things about setting a stone in a bale is that it's hard to keep it steady while you set the stone. So I'm going to try and use this dapping punch, sliding it through the bail. See if that helps me to get a little bit better grip on things. Now I do this differently than a lot of people. I use my flat side of my chain nose pliers here as a bezel pusher, and then I'll use the rounded outer side as a burnisher, but that's just the way I do it. You don't have to do it that way. I'm going to keep pushing it in here and there until it quits moving around and stays sitting flat. If you push too hard on one side, it'll push it up the other side sometimes. If you don't have a lot of hand strength, this stage of setting a stone can be hard. And so I think one of the things you can do to make it a little easier is by securing your piece in a vise of some sort, so you can bear down on it a little harder. Once I think it's kind of bent over it a little bit, then I'm going to start burnishing it, which is using that rounded outer edge. Okay, I'll put that on a chain, get some better pictures. I may use a blue silicone abrasive wheel, which is the one on the finer side, to clean up the top of the bezel if it looks rough. But tell me, I'm curious how other people mount stones on bezels. This is one way that I do it. I may show another way at some point, but it's been pretty effective for me. So tell me what you do. Okay, well that was how to put a little faceted stone on a simple bail. I hope you found that useful and enjoyable, and if you did, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button before you go. That really helps to get my channel promoted. I also would love it if you'd check out my main channel page on YouTube. I have tons of content. I've been doing this for close on 4 years, so there's lots of videos you can peruse, and I think there should be some things that are both interesting and useful to you over there. So check it out, and I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. There's no cost to it, and you can set it up to get notifications when I release a video, which I do on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So thanks in advance if you do that. I'd also love it if you'd hit the video description down below, not just for information about this video, but there's some important links there. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that nice community. There's multiple tiers of membership, which include different privileges, the lowest being just getting rid of the YouTube advertisement. So there's some other things that we do there. We do a monthly idea stimulator. We do Patreon exclusive videos, which I'll do one this week. We do live streams sometimes, which I had one last week and it was nice. I had 6 or 7 people talking to me from all over the world. That's always cool and fun. So check that out. It's a great place and a nice group of people. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks I talked about, or some other merch. And there's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2024's tutorials. It includes a page for each tutorial with details on it, like a picture of my sketch, a picture of the final outcome, a list of materials you need to make it, a difficulty rating, as well as some notes I made about the project itself, including things like, would I do it differently if I was to do it again, or did I learn something good from it, or did I like the outcome or not like the outcome, and why, and what would I change. So it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a super nice way to support my channel. And there's also one for 2023 as well, and you can get them both for a slight discount. So if you do that, thanks in advance, and thanks for watching today. So take care. Happy silversmithing.